Assalamu alaikum. Thank you for joining. We'll go ahead and get started. Assalamu alaikum again, and a warm welcome to everyone joining us today. And we will go ahead and get started. I'll introduce the report, but first, let me introduce myself. My name is Reem El-Shafaqi, and I'm partner at DinarStandard. I'm based in Dallas, Texas, and I'm honored to be the host for today's launch of the Bangladesh 2050 Towards Socio-Economic Prosperity report. Briefly about the report, the Bangladesh 2050 report, developed by DinarStandard, provides a long-term strategic vision guiding Bangladesh towards becoming a prosperous nation by 2050. It's grounded in today's socio-economic realities and informed by global megatrends. It outlines clear aspirations across 5 key areas: citizens, industry, government, ecosystem, and global connectivity. And it provides a phased roadmap with measurable targets to position Bangladesh as a leading global exporter in emerging sectors. And before we dive into the details of the report, I'll walk you through today's agenda. We'll begin with opening remarks from Dr. Said Farook. Then Ibrahim will share the findings from the report. And finally, we'll move into our panel discussion with government, consulting, and investment leaders. And with that, I'm pleased to now invite Dr. Said Farook to deliver the opening remarks. Over to you, Dr. Said.
Thank you very much, and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's my pleasure to be a host with my colleagues from DinarStandard on Bangladesh 2050 towards socio-economic prosperity. I also have the pleasure of having the following panelists with me: Brother Tausif, Ishtiaque, Dr. Anisuzzaman, Chowdhury, and Oussama, Glilah. Thank you all for joining us, and I appreciate the time you've taken to hear this out. How many of you actually believe that Bangladeshi people deserve a brighter future? I think all of you would agree that we do. I'm going to speak to you about the reality that Bangladesh is going to face. My name is Said Farook, and I've been a senior partner at DinarStandard for over 5 years. As you can see, most of you believe that Bangladesh has the opportunity to be a top 30 nation. Prior to being at DinarStandard, I used to be an advisor to the Director General of the Executive Office of His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum in Dubai, who was the Vice President Prime Minister of the UAE. And prior to that, I was a global head of Islamic capital markets for Thomson Reuters, which is now the London Stock Exchange Group. In this session, I will discuss with you why Bangladesh's fate is not set in stone. Through the data-driven insights and the analysis from our colleagues, you will appreciate the bright future Bangladesh has, regardless of who's in power. However, which can be brighter given the right leadership, strategy, systems, and execution on the ground. Ladies and gentlemen, national destinies are not predetermined. Many countries have demonstrated the ability to turn around their circumstances by focusing on a tried and tested formula and their strengths. Singapore, Rwanda, Estonia, Dubai have all benefited from none of the so-called advantages of traditional nations. Indeed, as key economists Darren Acemoglu and James Robinson stated, it is the quality of the institutional infrastructure, that is, whether the institutions are subject to capitulation by the reigning government, that determines whether the nation state can fail. So the question is Bangladesh a lost case facing the quagmire of being a failed state? Our firm conviction is it's not. And our view of the country strategy is that it isn't. Our anecdotal data suggests that countries have the ability to shape strategy and define their fortunes quite systematically. This is what I witnessed being a student of Dubai and the UAE. To give you some context, in the 1963, Dubai did not have the money to dredge its own creek, which was critical to get larger ships in Dubai Creek. It borrowed 3 million dinars to do that dredging, and it continued to do so. It did it for most of its grand-scale infrastructure projects that you know of now, and Dubai invested in its people. As we discussed in this briefing, Bangladesh has a surplus of labor force needed for much of the aging West. It has the ability to harness its resource to supply both skilled and unskilled workforce for the world for many decades to come. This is already a boon for Bangladesh now. Remittances, as you know, besides RMG, which is ready-made garments, is the largest source of foreign currency for the country. Can we export them in masses? Yes, absolutely we can. I'll give you an example. All across the developed world, there's a shortage of skilled labor in fields such as construction, aged care, automotive, healthcare, and hospitality, among others, and nursing. So there's plenty of opportunity in this space, and there is opportunity for everyone who seeks to be a player in terms of also business and investment opportunity. From an economic differentiation perspective, I'm personally an investor in multiple platform technology companies across Bangladesh. All of these, as you'll hear from my colleagues and also from my colleagues from BCG and from Razor Capital, have outperformed most of my other portfolio companies in other countries. I'm going to now pass it on to Reem, who's going to pass it on to the other speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Said, for the introductory remarks. And before I introduce Ibrahim to present the findings of the report, I wanted to let the audience know that if you have any questions, please ask them using the Q&A button that you see on the bottom of your screen. And throughout the panel discussion, we'll be selecting from the questions. So please also, if you see a question that you like and you would like to see answered, please upvote it. And that way we will more likely be selecting it to be answered during the panel discussion. And I would like to go ahead and welcome Ibrahim Vahed, who is Consulting Manager at DinarStandard, to present the findings of the report. Over to you, Ibrahim.
Thanks, Reem. And thanks, I think Dr. Sayed has laid some of that context. Really, Bangladesh stands at a once-in-a-generation position. A new leadership mandate in April 2026 will arrive just months before LDC graduation, while nearly 1/3 of the nation's citizens enter the workforce against slowing economic growth, making a decisive strategy not optional, but urgent. April 2026, the next general election, November 2026, LDC graduation, and all this against whilst 28% of the population will be ready or not to drive growth. We firmly believe that the next 18 months will set the trajectory for the next 18 years and beyond. Against this backdrop, the purpose of this Insights Brief is to establish a long-term aspiration to guide Bangladesh towards socio-economic prosperity and global competitiveness by 2050. This report is intended for policymakers, investors, entrepreneurs, youth, and development partners. We've employed a rigorous approach, which first defines the context in Bangladesh, uncovers high growth opportunities, and translates this to a 2050 aspiration framework with clearly defined aspirations, a roadmap for execution, and KPIs to measure progress. This approach has been tried and tested. So my name is Ibrahim Vahed. I'm a consulting manager here at DinarStandard. DinarStandard is a strategy and advisory firm that empowers organizations across the global south. We've delivered national development strategies for GCC governments, for Southeast Asian governments as well. We've advised multilaterals like the World Bank, ISDB, and we've shaped investment plans for some of the largest sovereign wealth funds in the world, by God's grace. We have leveraged our deep domain expertise in developing this Insights Brief. I also want to acknowledge, before we dive into the meat of this report, I want to acknowledge the contributors to this report, many of whom are on the call with us today. But I want to recognize people who are behind the scenes, specifically the consultative focus group of 31 individuals, right? It'll take me, I think, the full 10 minutes to name all of them. But their input has been crucial in understanding the situation on the ground. And I also want to acknowledge the wider DS team that has been involved in pulling this report together. So let's get into the context, right? So just a reminder, this document will be available for download, but I'll take you through some of the highlights from this report. The context, we've analyzed the context across socioeconomic, industry, government, ecosystem, and global connectivity. So I'll go through each one briefly. From a socioeconomic perspective, it's no doubt that Bangladesh's youthful demographic is a powerful growth engine, but gaps in inclusion are threatening to stall momentum. 28%, right? So about a third of the citizens are youth, creating a democratic dividend. Yet 30% are not in education, employment, or training, and 5 million people are homeless. These are clear signs that growth needs to be a bit more inclusive. From an industry perspective, we found that the current garment-heavy export delivers scale today, but diversification and skills upgrading are urgent. Ready-made garments drive 80% of exports, right? So this is considerable, yet 12% of GDP. It's a significant over concentration risk. Services are now 50% of GDP, driven primarily from IT and finance, yet tertiary enrollment is only at around 23%. This signals a potentially significant skill shortage. From a government perspective, we've looked at fiscal discipline, and it's actually fairly respectable. But governance, quality, and political stability are holding back investment. So if you look at public debt is around 35% of GDP, deficit is 5%. This indicates there's room to fund reforms. But conversely, Bangladesh ranks 146 out of 180 on the Corruption Perception Index. We've as an entity that's developed multiple of these indices, we understand that there are some limitations. However, the rating shows weak scores in regulatory quality and political stability, which is reflective of current realities. And then we look at the ecosystem. From an infrastructure perspective, we're seeing improvements in the ecosystem, specifically physical infrastructure, but connectivity remains a challenge. So the Padma Bridge is a prime example. It was once thought of as impossible. Yet today it connects southern parts with the capital as well as northern parts, stimulating trade. There's over 150 universities which anchor the human capital component, yet, I mentioned earlier that the enrollments are still relatively low, and internet penetration is fairly low at about 39%. There's significant room for expansion. And lastly, from a context perspective, we looked at global connectivity. We found that strategic location and current multilateral partnerships could make Bangladesh a logistical and manufacturing hub in South Asia. It's a member of OIC, SARC, D8, and there's early adoption of China's Belt and Road Initiative, which could potentially enhance deal flow. The Chittagong port expansion, growing EU-US export links reinforce this hub thesis. Okay, so this concludes the context analysis. Now that we've looked sort of internally at Bangladesh, we then sought to look externally at the global opportunities that Bangladesh can potentially capitalize on. To do this, we've employed an innovation megatrends model, a proprietary model. It really looks like a very broad perspective of global megatrends, and then we look at the intersection of those megatrends with available technologies, and then we finally add in the context of Bangladesh. From those opportunities, we get a long list of opportunities, and then we determine what some scenario planning based on those opportunities. Once we have the opportunities, we then prioritize them. And we've looked at, when we come to prioritization, we looked at the impact of these potential opportunities. Impact is really, or attractiveness, right? Which is really where is the investment going and where are deals flowing? And then in terms of fit, the second dimension, which is the fit with Bangladesh, we looked at the unique characteristics of Bangladesh and how these opportunities. So if you look at, high fit and high opportunity attractiveness and high fit is this upper right-hand side corner that you see on the screen. I want to highlight, there's 3 opportunities that stood out. There's urbanization and smart cities, climate change adaptation, and digital transformation. So now that we have this internal context, then we looked at the external opportunities. We've taken both of these insights and we've then created a 2050 aspirations framework for Bangladesh. There are 5 components of this aspiration framework. We have defined industry aspiration, which you see up at the top of that diagram, which is Bangladesh as a strong, competitive, and diversified domestic market while enhancing export capabilities. We've defined the citizen aspiration for Bangladesh as core focus on citizens' welfare and socio-economic upliftment. Now, these 2 aspirations can only be realized with an enabling ecosystem. So we have 3 pillars that underpin that ecosystem, and we've defined the aspirations for each one of those pillars as an efficient government, a supportive ecosystem, and robust global connectivity. Now, this is just not this aspiration is really just not words and an aspirational vision. It's practical targets that we've and accompanying this aspiration framework is a set of KPIs and a roadmap. So in total, there are 25 KPIs, and these are just the KPIs that you see now for the first component, the second aspiration, which is socio-economic aspiration. It's very, very granular. For example, per capita income, we've set a target by 2050 of 15,000 USD per capita income. Currently, if you look at that value as of 2023, it's around 2,500. Now, the roadmap that we've covered outlines how you can achieve that 15,000 USD per capita. So these are just 5 KPIs for this one aspiration. We have further 20 KPIs that are detailed in the report. Similarly, from a roadmap perspective, to achieve these aspirations, we've linked it to the KPIs. So phase 1 is roughly to build foundations. Phase 2 is to accelerate growth, and phase 3 is to lead globally. This de-risks execution and matches investment to capacity. So again, we've defined, this is just a roadmap for one of the aspirations. We've defined it for all 5. And the question is, what has to happen now? For that, I'm going to hand it back to my colleague, Dr. Syed Farook, to expand on what really has to happen now in order to lay the foundations and set up a strong base to realize this aspiration.
Thank you to the audience for having the patience of looking through this report. Of course, there's been a lot of work that's gone into it, and appreciate that we can't cover everything in a lot of detail. However, this is a long-term journey. It's a journey of 25 years. Having experienced these in other contexts, we know that you still have to start the race with a positive momentum. Now, for whoever comes to power in May, 26th April to be exact, they need to launch with a critical momentum that requires bringing together all the right stakeholders. Our view is that a national transformation strategy of this magnitude needs to involve the experts in all areas of importance to gather their expert insights. This is why we've recommended a council of experts in areas of critical importance to the future of the country. Our basis of choosing this was on first principles. So what are the areas of critical improvement that we need as a country? This then therefore has to be managed by a project management office. In our context, we take from the playbook of Saudi Arabia, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, who called it the Vision Realization Office. Because if you want to have a vision for 2050, should be driving that vision. This office needs to sit within the center of government and direct that vision so that they can actually have the capacity to not only gather the ecosystem elements, but also direct it through policy shifts and transference of policies and laws into government and create the budgetary mechanisms for that. Now I'm going to pass it on to Reem to work through the next part of the session.
Thank you, Dr. Sayed, and thank you, Ibrahim, for the insightful presentation. And before we begin our panel discussion, I wanted to remind everyone that you can download the full report on DinarStandard's website at DinarStandard.com. So feel free after the session to go ahead and download the full report. And now we'll move on to the panel discussion, which brings together leaders from government, strategy, and investment to reflect on the implications of the findings of the report and share their perspectives. I'll briefly introduce the panelists. Dr. Anisuzzaman Chowdhury is Special Assistant to the Chief Advisor at the Ministry of Finance of Bangladesh. Tausif Ishtiaque is Partner at the Boston Consulting Group, BCG. And Oussama Glilah is Co-Founder and Managing Partner at Razor Capital. And Dr. Sayed Farook will be moderating the panel discussion, and I'll hand it to you, Dr. Sayed.
Thank you so much, Reem. I appreciate that. I'd love to now welcome my participants, and I'll start with the most senior of them all, Professor Emeritus, Dr. Anisuzzaman Chowdhury. For those of you who don't know, he has a distinguished career as an academic, but also in addition to that, in international development in the United Nations, and now is a sitting member of the government, trying to steer the government towards doing critical reforms in this very short period until the government moves on to elections and appoints a government that takes over after that. Professor Anisuzzaman, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Sorry, my voice is a bit hoarse because I don't know what happened to my voice cord. It has been going on for quite some time now. I had
you sound perfectly fine.
ENT had looked at it 3 times, didn't find anything other than saying that it's just the age is taking over.
You're doing perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Professor, you've now been responsible for the Ministry of Finance, and you've been thinking about this area for a while now, not only just for Bangladesh, but also globally in many other contexts. As you see the challenges and you're responsible for budget allocation as well, how do you envision that the Bangladesh's Ministry of Finance becomes a strategic investment vehicle that achieves a vision like we've encapsulated in our report from just managing our traditional transactional budget allocator as traditionally found in a lot of these Ministry of Finances?
Let me begin with by congratulating the DinarStandard for a very in-depth and wonderful report, and it's quite visionary. So I must congratulate you guys for doing that. The budgetary thing that what you mentioned, in the traditional sense, you cannot move budget radically, change the budget radically. Changes happen only at the margin. This is the reality of doing budget. Because you cannot just discontinue some kind of ongoing program, even if you know that this program is useless. There is a limit up to which you can radically change the course. Unless you have a government which starts from scratch. Everything you like. What I give you an example, say Syria in the recent time. You have a revolutionary government. Hopefully, it has a plan. In most cases, these governments come to power without necessarily having a plan for tomorrow. So, and then you see, they mess around. In the case of Bangladesh, it was even worse because nobody predicted this. No political party was prepared for the event that happened. It was so spontaneous. Everybody was expecting something to happen, but there was no preparation. Plus, historically, I would say, even it is true for most of the countries, we are used to negative politics, saying everything no to existing government is very easy, but providing a positive program is rare. So this is the problem with most governments, especially those who come through a revolutionary path, and they find it difficult to transform from a political sort of an activism to governing. You can see this in most newly independent countries. It happened. So from that point of view, what we have to do is to be pragmatic and choose some critical areas where you can be, or you can expect to bring some positive change. In my judgment, and you have touched upon it, like the youth and employment and human education and all these things. Why I say this, if you look at the population structure of Bangladesh, the population in the age bracket of 15 to 29, which is youth, constitute roughly about 30% of the population. So this is a qualitative change, and these kind of things happens only once in a nation's history. The population demography, when a nation starts as a young nation, normally you'll find it's a kind of a pyramid, a very wide base, and it slowly narrows up like a triangle and a pyramid. And then you get the bit of a kind of a bulging in the middle, which is now we have, and then the bulge will happen at the top, what Japan and those countries are now. And in the case of Sri Lanka, for example, this transition happened. The country became old before it became rich. So they have a big problem now. They have to support an aging population with a shrinking working age population. It's a big problem. So we have to really plan this one, how we do this. What I propose, and I'm working on it actually, is, I mean, in a gradually, as I said, gradually over, say, 10 years, we bring the youth who reach the age of 18, say, for example, for a 2-year compulsory national service. And we can introduce progressively, as I say, 10 years every year. And over 10 years, you cover all 100%. And the budgetary implication will be very, very small, and we have a modality to introduce it. It's a matter of expanding it. In my time, when I was growing high school, In my high school, we had a compulsory training in year 9 and year 10. It was compulsory for all of us, unless you are physically weak or you have some disabilities. We had to do that. It was a proper training for 2 years, along with our normal curricula. And when we went to the college, which is year 11 and 12, it became voluntary. And for the university also. But now, in Bangladesh, they have something called Bangladesh National Credit Corps, BNCC. So they do the same thing, and 2 years national training. So we just expand that to cover all the 18 years and 19 years old. What you get, you also provide them some vocational training, not just the military training, training in disaster management. And this is already happening, but just increase, expand it, include some language training. You will see after 2 years, you will find a disciplined workforce who are used to getting up early in the morning, physically fit. And then majority of them will not go back to the university. They will be self-employed because they will get some vocational training. Some of them will find jobs overseas as skilled workers. So that the benefit you will immediately see in the quality of higher education going up. And then you can call them up for any disaster management and climate change or whatever related. So you got this. More importantly, this will be an important deterrent for any external forces that may have an eye on Bangladesh, because they would know that there is a trained reservist who can be called up at short notices. So I'm working on it. Hopefully, we can introduce this before we leave the government. So you can, as I said, programs like that is feasible. So it's not the entire budget or entire. The other thing that I'm working on is to develop the capital market. Our capital market is very weak. It is always, so far it was regarded as a residual. It was not part of the mainstream, and it was used to enrich some people. So I'm working on that area. So if we can have a very good capital market, and then raising fund is important. You don't have to depend too much on foreign borrowing. You can raise your capital domestically. And so those are two areas. The other areas that this current government is trying is to strengthen the domestic resource mobilization, part of the taxation and those sort of things. So in a few areas, you can work. Connectivity is another thing, the infrastructure, which you have mentioned. We are focusing in improving the efficiency of the Chittagong port, which is very vital. And we got the Starlink now working for the internet connectivity and so on, so forth. So it is possible, even within the short period of time, to achieve those. We can put the country on the right track. For example, this national service, we won't be able to cover all the 100% of them, but we start the program, as I said, progressively over 10 years, whichever government comes, it will be difficult to reverse it back.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Professor. And it appears this idea that we've been toying with for about 40 years now, its time has come, and let's hope, inshallah, that you can implement it, because We've been waiting for this, and it appears that most countries that have gone through a development journey from Singapore to the UAE to Israel and many others in the world have all implemented national service as a requirement for the country's development and growth. And I love that the fact that it will have a vocational approach to it. One of the questions that I've gotten from a participant, Brother Abdullah Amin, is if you had the necessary power, what would be the most urgent change you'd like to make and implement within the remaining time of the interim government? I think you answered a few, but I'd love to hear a little bit more. And I have a related question, which is, if related to that is a number of countries, particularly those that even have limited wealth, start allocating pool to a strategic wealth fund that then participates with government in strategic investment opportunities, some form of a blended finance. What do you see the prospects of that in a context of and a crowd, capital crowding capital in that sense? What do you think are the opportunities for that in the context of Bangladesh?
We got a wonderful opportunity. This is what I was talking about, the developing capital market. And so this is very much on our agenda item. And we are hoping to, we still have that instrument, but it was not publicized well. What is called diaspora bond, say for example, that the people like you guys living abroad, can invest in diaspora bond, and you can also join with the raise venture capital, joint ventures, and these are all possible, and we are working on that actually.
Okay,
so that is very much on our agenda.
Thank you, Professor. I'd like to move, if you don't mind, I'll also ask some of the other colleagues and move to a much more strategic viewpoint from a colleague who's been working with the government and with the private sector quite significantly in giving strategic advice as the partner on the ground in Bangladesh, Mr. Tausif Ishtiaque. Thank you so much for joining us, Tausif. And what I'd love to ask you about is, I'm sure you are speaking to international investors and partners in Bangladesh and also donors. What do you feel, given that BCG works in other countries and you have worked personally in other countries as a partner and as a BCG employee, is where are the blind spots for international partners, donors, and investors when they look at Bangladesh's trajectory? Does Bangladesh have the opportunity that we so confidently predict and have conviction on to achieve its goal by 2050, its goals?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Syed, for the opportunity to speak, and thank you to the esteemed panelists as well for sharing your views. So on the, I think, firstly, whether I share the optimism of the audience on the topic of Bangladesh's future, I definitely do. And I do have the same optimism in terms of where this country is heading. I've lived through the resilience, the economic resilience that this economy has shown over the past years during the global financial crisis, during the COVID crisis, and during the recent economic turmoil as well. The country has always come through and become stronger throughout all these crises. So while I feel there are definitely blind spots out there, but at the end of the day, the economic fundamentals and the demographic fundamentals of having a very strong, driven youth who will drive the country towards the future still holds true. And that's something which will always be the driving force for Bangladesh going ahead. In terms of the blind spots, I just want to make sure that I'm taking the right points on this. By when you say blind spots, you mean the areas for development that Bangladesh should focus on. which might be a pitfall if not focused on in the future. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, I meant in the sense of where they, when they're looking at inward into the country from outside, what are they not seeing that you get to see as a partner in Bangladesh? You get to see that on, you know, local landscape in a lot more color than they would.
Yeah.
And often one of the issues that investors have from outside of Bangladesh is this concern because they only hear the headlines and they don't know the context and the nuance, and they don't necessarily know what Bangladesh's unique strengths are. They don't necessarily have that full picture. So what are the things that are, I guess, some of the myths and issues that they could debunk?
Yeah. I think from a investor point of view, historically we've seen that Bangladesh has received very good investment from the development partners. So a lot of the development partners have invested heavily. So if you talk about likes of World Bank, ADB, China, everyone has been very involved, and everyone has, even after the government change last year, everyone has reassured their continued support to the government. So on the development capital point of view, I think we're very well positioned in the short term as well as in the long term. From a private capital point of view, there are certain areas which we do need to look at, right? And in terms of areas where we as a country would need to be well positioned going forward. One is, what is beyond RMG or ready-made garments for Bangladesh? I think that is a critical question that a lot of the global investors do ask. That beyond the labor arbitrage that you get in Bangladesh, what else is there for an investor? And of course, there are certain areas which can be better promoted, better branded. And I like the idea that you had in your presentation, which was Brand Bangladesh 2.0, which I believe BIDA has started to do recently with the Investor Summit and with the Chinese Summit, which has happened recently as well. So the areas have been being worked on in terms of promoting not only Bangladesh as a labor arbitrage country, but also as a country which has a huge consumer hub. Because we have a very large consumer base who are hungry for good products, good services, and who gives there is a right economic fundamentals for any good investor to come in and take advantage of from a local market point of view. And secondly, utilizing this as the hub, there is an opportunity to expand to the region overall, because there's a region which can be looked at, starting from the Seven Sisters in India and to other nearby countries in Southeast Asia and South Asia. There are a lot of opportunities which can be catered to by being in Bangladesh. So not just the local market in Bangladesh, but the immediate vicinity. Thirdly, I think the ports that Dr. Chowdhury has been talking about, the efficiency in ports is going to play a very big role in terms of making Bangladesh more, I guess, economically attractive for any investor to come in and set up. Because right now, if a manufacturer comes in and sets up in Bangladesh, the first thing they have to worry about is, okay, how do I bring in the raw materials, and then how do I ship my products out if I want to export? And it's as soon as they look at the logistics, as soon as they look at the ports, it becomes the attractiveness goes down quite a lot. So that's an area which does need to be worked on. So there need to be continuous investments in infrastructure along on the hard infrastructure as well as the ports. The other area which Bangladesh should be thinking about quite heavily is on not only the physical infrastructure, which I was talking about on the port side, but also on the digital infrastructure. Because as soon as a new investor comes in, they expect a lot of things to happen digitally, and that's an area which we unfortunately have not been in the past we have not been very efficient in. Now, interoperability between systems do not really exist within the government or with the private sector. And that lack of interoperability means there's islands and silos which have been created. And as a result, everyone has to do everything repeatedly and share data repeatedly as well. So those are areas which I think are of immediate focus for Bangladesh, looking at, first of all, what is there beyond RMG, to create that brand Bangladesh, which helps to showcase the local brand, local country, local economy, as well as the emerging opportunity beyond that. Secondly is the infrastructure development, both the physical infrastructure as well as the digital infrastructure. So these are blind spots which I think needs to be looked at immediately. If you think about slightly longer term point of view, there is a climate resilience. I know in the polls, the climate resilience didn't really come up, the poll that we did at the beginning of this session. But climate resilience is an area which global investors are looking for. And that's an area where there is increased investment focus as we go on. There have been, of course, some challenges in the recent past, given some of the pullbacks from some of the Western nations. But at the end of the day, this will remain an existential issue for the human race. And as long as this remains an existential issue, this will remain a strong determinant of where capital flows as well. So I think the climate resilience, as in addition to the economic resilient topics that I mentioned, will be super important.
I think this is a question for, thank you so much, Mr. Tausif. I want to ask a question, and I think it could also be answered by Dr. Anisuzzaman as well. Is, in your perspective, this is from one of the attendees. A lot of people are, of course, excited about the graduation of Bangladesh from LDC status in 2026. What do you think is going to happen as a result of that graduation, and how is that going to affect our status? Because a lot of that enabled us also to receive a lot of development funding as well.
Yeah. Maybe I'll start off, and then Dr. Chowdhury, you can, I think you will be very well placed to respond to this. But overall, firstly, the development capital, whatever I have seen, and I've been working with some of the development partners that work with Bangladesh, they have been repeatedly, committing their future development capital to be flowing to Bangladesh, regardless of whether we go graduate from LDC or not. And we have seen this in other countries as well. So it's just because an LDC graduation takes place, development capital doesn't always stop. It is the primary thing is how the development capital is being utilized. As long as the development capital is being utilized in the right sectors, it will still continue to flow. Of course, the cost of the development capital will go up, and hence the question for Bangladesh will be: is it worth to still go after the development capital where the cost has gone up, or should we look for more efficient private capital? And that's a question that we'll have to grapple with as we go along. And I think the country will come to that in a couple of years' time, regardless of what the development partners are saying today. Now, on what happens after the graduation is beyond the development capital. Of course, we do lose some economic privileges, such as free market access to a lot of the Western nations. So free trade agreements, which the government has already started to discuss with some of the other governments, I know, is going to be very, very important. So individual free trade agreements with our trade partners will be very, very important to be set up over the next few years. And in addition to that, the private sector also has to make a leap towards more efficient business models and move up the value chain as well. So because as if we continue to focus on purely labor-based businesses, then it's going to be very, very difficult for us to continue to stay competitive in the global market. Given that other LDCs will get more preference from it than us on the preferential trade agreements. So those are areas which will be the free trade agreements will need to be renegotiated. The businesses will have to move up the value chain and become ideally more AI enabled to ensure that we are more efficient. And also the overall development capital negotiations will have to take place.
Thank you so much. Professor, I'm conscious of the time, so I'm just going to ask, and then we'll return back to this because there is an interesting question around AI that's come up from the panelists, and I think it's an important one to answer, given that we export our talent and our labor to the world now. But before that, I want to introduce my last panelist, who's Oussama Glilah. I've known him since I was in Dubai, I think 2018, and he told me 2017 or 16, I don't remember. He came to my office and he said, Bangladesh is in a really exciting place. And I was like, I don't even know anything about Bangladesh's markets. And he was there investing in Bangladesh. And I was like, what prompted you all the way from, I think, Lebanon or Iraq? Where was it, Oussama?
I was in the UK at the
You were in the
time.
UK. My
I
apologies. Yes.
grew up in Lebanon, but I'm
Yes.
Palestinian, so
You're in the, you're
that's
in the
my
UK.
background.
Yes. And he started investing there, so that intrigued me, and I was very excited about the interesting investments he was making in Bangladesh. And we've been in touch, and we've seen the growth of Razor Capital and its investments in Bangladesh, and we hope it invests a lot more. Oussama, as a investor in Bangladesh, what signals do you look for now, given that you've been in it for about more than 9 years now, I guess? That the Bangladesh market is about to inflect, given that you, of course, I'm presuming you want exits from your investments, you want your investments to mature. What are you looking for?
Okay, so basically, first of all, thank you, Dr. Syed, for having me on board on this panel discussion, and nice to meet my fellow panelists and all the attendees here. So it's an interesting question, right? Because I think inflection in the market does not necessarily mean exits, right? An inflection of the market could mean sudden interest, but that does not guarantee liquidity or exits. That's one. So I can answer the question two ways: how to like generate the exit and what we look for in inflection, and being mindful of time, of course. So first of all, you know, when a economy or a country is about to reach that inflection, I'm looking at it from like a venture perspective, or like let's say a private equity perspective, right? There's several things. First of all, you need to look at how much foreign capital is flowing into the country, which is very important. That's the, you know, I looked at the public markets in the US, and why they're so far ahead of everyone else is just because the whole world puts their money there, right? So global capital is a big thing for any country, even the US. Government policy is a big one, you know, as big as anything else. What kind of policy is that? I can't say everything for certain. Maybe you know, Dr. Chowdhury would know better than me, but you know, from an investor perspective, it would be in terms of facilitating investment, money flow in and out, encouraging M&A, supporting grassroots, right? Supporting SMEs, public regulator. So like also like government policy towards transparency, accountability, and ensuring that your public markets are regulated. Because also to Dr. You know, Chowdhury's point, you know, there's a few that did benefit from the public markets. We do view the stock market in Bangladesh to have some element of, you know, stock manipulation. Do I have the evidence? No, I don't. But, you know, you just look at the stocks. It's really the you know, let's say the top 10 companies that have institutional investors, that have, you know, professional investors that hold the stock and control the volume, that, you know what I mean? You get something where it's investable. Market liquidity, which ties into the public market, but that ties into government policy. It ties into, you know, how well the stock market is regulated. And then, of course, political stability, right? Now, every country will have bumps on the road. You know, no one is immune to that. But really, it's about how does the country deal with the bumps? Are there processes in place? Is there proper governance in place to deal with these bumps? And, you know, do all stakeholders in the country respect the process that has been agreed upon, or whatever is in place to ensure that such a stability, like such stability, is encouraged and maintained, right? I think from like a high level, I'm sure there's probably one or two things that I may have missed, but from a high level, at least from an investor, if we see that these things align and there's a track record of it over multiple years, because an inflection is not like, oh, it happened in 1 month and then that inflection happened. It like leads up to it, and then you reach to that inflection point, and then it's a 1-2 year period, and then you really start to see the fruits of that labor, right? So I think when these things come together, and I have no doubt that at some point Bangladesh will be able to put this together, it's just a question of when, not if, the doors will open.
Thank you, Oussama. And just to kind of top it off, and I'm conscious of time, and we'd love to have this conversation for hours on end, because this is a really exciting one. Hopefully, we'll do a live one in Bangladesh, in Dhaka. The are you, given that you've been there through a number of interesting cycles and governments as well, do you still feel bullish on Bangladesh? Are you long on Bangladesh, or how do you feel about the investment climate? Or is it because you invested when no one was investing in Bangladesh. So how do you feel about it now?
I don't think I have a choice on how I feel. You know, we have to make sure that the ship gets to the promised land, sooner or later. But jokes aside, yes, I am still long on Bangladesh. To be honest, we always had the feeling with the previous government, with the amount of corruption, we started to see that the time was limited. But what caught us by surprise is the timing. But what's happened in Bangladesh is actually encouraging, right? Because the people came out, questioned the governance that was in place and the decisions and the people that were more or less milking the country, for lack of better wording, right? And took action and put something in place with the intent of, creating something like a platform that could ensure that any of the challenges and sort of weaknesses, in the governance of the country are dealt with, right? So that on its own gives me the encouragement that the Bangladeshi people have what's, their best interests in mind and wish to create a better future for themselves.
Thank you. And I am conscious of time, Reem. You're probably gonna punish me soon. So please let me know if how much time I have.
I think maybe we can take another 5 minutes or so.
Okay, I'm
Just
gonna close it
because
off with a couple of questions from the audience, and I'd love to ask these to all of you. One of which is really interesting, and this is a very significant one, and I'd love to hear from any of you. We've been doing some work with some clients who are looking at markets like Bangladesh, which has a large freelancer population, as you know. And AI is significantly set to impact jobs and education and more in places like Bangladesh. And one of the questions that the audience has, what is um, the way that we can prepare for this in a proactive way to address this in a systematic and long-term way, so that we can actually take advantage of the changes that are happening in Bangladesh, in the world, but also ride that wave. I'm not sure who wants to answer that.
I can take a quick shot at it, and then the gentleman can,
Go for
take
it.
over if they would like. I don't think AI will replace anyone in Bangladesh anytime soon, for the simple being that AI costs more than hiring a Bangladeshi. I don't mean that in any bad way, right?
Okay.
And I think by the time the West figures out their AI, I do see AI to augments people. Yeah, okay, some people will lose their jobs, but it will augment productivity, right? And I think the trick for Bangladesh is how do we incorporate that productivity into a context that adds value to Bangladeshi companies and Bangladeshi society, right? So that's my view.
Okay. Anyone else? Professor Anisuzzaman?
Not really. I mean, I just would like to respond to some of the issues that you guys mentioned. Again, I must say I'm very impressed with the presentation as well as the discussion by the panelists, especially both Tausif and Oussama. The optimism I can see in them, in the young population, as I said. My focus is that age group between 15 and 29. So this is very hopeful sign for Bangladesh. People of my age always have got some gloom and pessimism that nothing will happen. I'm regarded as a bit unorthodox kind of economist. I would like to, if you have time, I would like to address some of the misconception that we carry. One is so-called development partner and development finance. This is completely misnomer, because what they give is a loan. It's not for actually investment, and they are the source of corruption. There in the literature, it is well documented. These are the supply. They supply the corruption. To a lot of these, like yesterday, or day before yesterday, Bangladesh signed up with the World Bank, 25 crore dollar, a loan agreement for so-called improving governance and capacity building. How do you measure this? And these are all loose money that comes with this. And then people will be spending money on consultancies. Okay, and then JICA, for example, is the worst. Now the metro rail that is designed is completely faulty. The entire design is fault. Has not taken any consideration of the local conditions, and their consultants are very expensive. So the money actually goes back to them. So we really have to look at alternative sources of finance. That's why the capital market is very important for Bangladesh. That's why the work of people like Oussama is very much welcome in Bangladesh. Yeah, I'm really pleased with what you say. This actually line. We have to get out of this mentality. I give you an example from history. You have mentioned countries, small countries like Singapore and Dubai, and people will say, oh, this is small countries. Things what they did may not apply to Bangladesh. So I'll give an example of big countries. Okay, they're not as big as Bangladesh. I start from Korea, South Korea. In the 60s, South Korea was the poorest country in the world. Was the poorest country in the world. And I spoke to my colleagues who were at my age in the 60s, in year 3, 4, 5 in the primary schools. How was it like life in while you were a student of year 4 or year 5? They said they never saw rice. If they heard someone brought rice for their lunch in the school, they would line up to see what rice looked like. So they really lived on foraging, eating grasses and leaves, whatever they could put their hands on. And when North and South divided, all the industries, including the power generation, were in the North. The South had nothing. It only survived through the US aid and open access to the US market. So aid and open access to the market were there. Koreans used to come to Pakistan in those days to learn development. They used to come to Pakistan to learn development because Pakistan was the star performer in the 60s. The only country which achieved all the targets given to countries in the first decade of development by the UN. Even before the decade was ended, in 1968, I still remember we celebrated in Pakistan the decade of development. In 1967, the Koreans wanted to connect Busan, their main port city, with the capital city Seoul, with a 4-lane expressway. And so they approached the World Bank, whether World Bank could finance this as a development partner. The World Bank laughed them away, that you don't have rice to eat, hardly any car, and you are dreaming to build 416 kilometers distance, roughly from Cox's Bazar to Rangpur, say, for example, in Bangladesh. A 4-lane expressway. And they refused. So Korea could have gone to the US asking for aid or other countries. But then There was a very bright young Pakistani economist, happened to be from Bangladesh. He passed away in January this year. He produced a very theoretical paper called, the title was Welfare Economics of Aid, where he showed that the aid basically will make you lazy, your tax effort will decline, your foreign investment will be very low, because if they can loan to you in the name of aid, it's a guaranteed return. Sovereign debt cannot default. And why they should take the risk of investing in equity? So your foreign investment will be low, and you will not have the policy independence. They will dictate the policy. So you'll be worse off. And Korean learned from that. Because they used to come to there, Pakistan. We did not learn. So they then used the money they received from Japanese as a compensation for the Second World War, and asked their military engineering corps to take this project. So in 1967, they started planned that project. In 1968, they commenced the project. In 1970, in 2 years, they completed the project. And in 1980, in 10 years' time, they put up their hand to host the Olympic in 1988. So only in 15 years, they became a developed country. Just that one decision. As I said, you don't need many, many things to do development. Just one critical decision. Take the example of Japan.
Thank you, Professor. I'm sorry, we're conscious of time, and a lot of the attendees have a lot of questions. And I know Reem's been raising her hand. That's really exciting. And I hope that your one decision, and which is, I hope, is national service, you get to implement it, and you include AI in there, and you include, 21st century skills as part of their vocational development. That might just be that,
Can I suggest one thing? I'll be quite happy to organize a seminar like this physically in Bangladesh. If there is no other one to host it, I'll host it from our capital market regulatory body, which is Bangladesh Securities and Investment Commission, BSEC. And I'm working with the Australian Securities and Investment Commissions to come and advise us on how to improve the governance, because Oussama did mention about corruptions. It did happen, governance failure. As I said, we are taking the capital market very seriously to develop it. And there are a lot of opportunities for people like Oussama and Tausif to invest in Bangladesh. So we'll try to do that. So that's why I'm saying, and I'm quite happy to organize a workshop or seminar.
We're looking forward to engaging Professor, and we will bring a lot of others. I know that there was a comment, and I'm going to pass it on to Reem after this. I think there is a lot of people, particularly Bangladeshi diaspora, and it was a question, not only Bangladeshi diaspora, but a number of other people who've also asked how they can engage with the government, how can they contribute to what's happening in Bangladesh, because there is the interest in the past 9 months or so from many people outside of Bangladesh to want to contribute. They happen to be Bangladeshi, but they also happen to be others as well. And they'd love to know how they can, is there pathways? And then one of the things that we just suggested in the report itself is a soft landing pad for these individuals, because people like myself or others that are outside want to contribute, want to bring their investments into Bangladesh, want to set up enterprises. But it's hard, as it's mentioned in some of these comments, and they're waiting for some support or something. And I've heard this number of times, because it's very hard to do business there. The process is clunky and archaical, and they're not used to the bureaucracy. Although people who operate in Bangladesh, and Oussama, who's become a proud Bangladeshi now, we should give him a passport, is is used to and understands that this is a part of the development pangs of our country, right? So I'd love to. I know that we have a lot to talk on, and we'd love to continue this conversation face to face and inshallah in Bangladesh, and bring other global investors and partners who would love to contribute to this. I know we have some very exciting people who are international consultants who would love to be a part of this as well. Reem, would you like to top it off, close it off?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Said, and thank you to the panelists.
Reem, can I just add 1 or 2 points as the people who want to contribute. It is difficult in Bangladesh in the environment, but we're trying to improve. BIDA is trying to introduce a national single window where you can go and get things done under one roof. I'm thinking to have a website where people can just log in and say, I want to do this. And then I'll find a partner who would pick it up and then start the conversation between two parties. So kind of a matchmaking activity that I'm thinking to do from my side. So that's just as a matter of information.
Thank you, Dr. Anisuzzaman, and really very interesting insights. And I wish we could stay for longer. I feel the conversation was very insightful. And as you can see from the questions, we've only scratched the surface of the exciting opportunity that that is there for Bangladesh. And the questions that weren't answered, we will answer them on our LinkedIn channel for the event. So please, if you have any additional questions, you could ask them there, and we'll do our best to answer them. And a reminder again to download the report. I feel we do need to keep these conversations going. And thank you, Dr. Anisuzzaman, for your offer to having a session on the ground. And this is only the beginning, and we need to continue our discussions and to continue being engaged. And please do share your ideas on the LinkedIn channel, download the report, and ask any additional questions once you've had a chance to fully read it. And once again, I thank the panelists. I thank the audience for staying on and for being engaged. And we look forward to staying in touch. Assalamu alaikum. Have a great day or evening, wherever you are. Thank you.
Alaikum salam.